Okay, you are live.
Good evening and welcome to the Monday, March 31st, 2025 budget meeting. I will take roll. Mr. Lyons?
Here.
Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Day?
Here.
Mr. Lewis is not, and I am here. FY26 budget update. We'll take a pause.
Okay.
All right, we're at the update.
Okay. Before Mr. Harrison presents his budget memo, I wanted to briefly review the process so far and the planned schedule ahead. Budget season is just a recap. Budget season kicked off with a review of the 5-year CIP and requests for any new projects back in October. And the board received the draft CIP in December. And as you normally do, you provisionally adopted it in January, and that was to include the school CIP. In a parallel path, the call for operational budgets went out in late October. And by the third week of January, we had received most budgets from county departments, constitutional offices, external agencies, and nonprofits. Staff met with departments, and by staff, it's Mr. Harrison and I met with departments to review their budgets and negotiate some amendments before taking them to the Finance Committee in late January. And the Finance Committee has met almost weekly over the course of February and the first half of March. In the meantime, the board held a work session to hear requests from 501c3s and also jointly met with the school board. As has been the board's plan, nearly all capital projects are slated for cash payment from reserves. And despite that, we started with a very large budget gap, as you know, and have since been able to reduce it to where it now stands at right at $708,000. If we stay on track with the budget schedule, we'll be returning to you at your next regular meeting on April 14th with the request to advertise a budget for a public hearing on April 28th. And of course, the goal tonight and over the next week and a half is to reach a balanced budget to advertise for that public hearing and subsequently then for adoption on May the 5th. And I just want to let you know several times over the years, I think last year was one of them, if we push that adoption date out for any reason, if we do that, we'd have to extend the tax due date in early June because once you, I'm sorry, I should have those on. Once you adopt or once you pass a budget, the Commissioner of Revenue needs time to create a real estate book, send that over to the treasurer's office, and then the treasurer has to look at it and then send it off to get the tax bills printed. And the idea is you do your best to give up to 30 days notice from folks. If it's June 5th due date for payment, and you're adopting on May the 5th, that truncates that down a little bit. It takes about a week to get all those two processes done and then get the bills out. So at this point, I'll just turn it over to Ashton and provide some highlights to his memo that is online.
Thank you. Also, thank you to Supervisors Lyons and McDaniel. We've met as a finance committee more times this year's budget than since I've been here, and they've made a lot of progress narrowing that budget gap, as Mr. Suter has mentioned. But we reached a point that we need input from the whole board on how to proceed. The current draft before you that was also provided on board docs has a budget gap of negative $708,709. The total revenues amount to $64,091,878, and this includes $4,626,299 in the use of reserves for capital projects. and restricted reserves from EMS recovery fees. Total expenses amount to $64,800,587, which is $328,863 higher than FY25's adopted budget. And that includes $3,913,796 for capital projects. And as a reminder, also provided to the board and on board docs is the provisional CIP with some recommended changes by the Finance Committee. And of course, the CIP will be for adoption as well alongside the budget on the same date. This draft of the budget, the personal property tax remains unchanged at 425. Also 425 for other personal property, 255 for machinery and tools. And the estimated PPTRA rate is 30%. The real property tax rate currently in this draft is at 61 cents. Revenue is higher at $278,586 due to increased valuations. 1 cent on the real property tax rate is estimated to generate $326,571, and we estimate a 97% collection rate. The sales tax estimates were revised upwards, and lodging taxes are estimated to be lower based on current year trends as we report each month. It looks like we're overly optimistic in our estimates for the current fiscal year and what lodging taxes would do. Of course, you've been provided the full budget, and also on a paper copy is the summary of the budget. The capital expenditures, we have $3,088,244 for provisional CIP projects, $34,282 for the Rockbridge Regional Libraries capital projects, $560,000 for 4 school buses, and $231,270 for central dispatch capital purchases. I should have mentioned under operating expenses, one of the things that did come down a little bit is our operational cost for central dispatch. That board had its meeting and submitted their budget request, which was higher, or this current draft is less than what was previously provided to you. Another, as previously mentioned, the health insurance remains unchanged. That's really good. We do have a bond payment, a new bond payment of $239,635 for the new social services building. We have proposed a 3% raise for all employees and an additional 10% raise for fire and rescue personnel. And this also, as you recall, we're potentially looking at a 1.5% bonus for all constitutional officers and their employees. And that does look like that's going to pass through the General Assembly and the Comp Board. So we went ahead and included that 1.5% in our bonus in this draft budget. As of course, the school board and the Board of Supervisors had their joint meeting, and they are comfortable with the proposed local contributions to operating expenses at $17,284,708. And one of the things we've done for the school division debt is we just put in prior years, including the current fiscal year, we put in the roughly additional $70,000, and that's the city of Lexington's share. We took that out because they pay that directly. So we've been over budgeting that debt amount. The Finance Committee has looked at the capital improvement plan. Some of the recommended changes for the board to consider to the provisional is $229,300 in additional funds for the South River Collection Center. There'll be some carryover funds from the current fiscal year, but we'll need those additional funds. the $1,774,300 for cash match for the broadband project with Brightspeed, which is underway. And that's really great job that Mr. Suter and Brightspeed working together has accomplished getting that knocked out. And the Central Shenandoah Plain District Commission staff, just from my standpoint, was really impressed by how that came together. There's a recommended $171,625 for courthouse security upgrades. As mentioned before, we have a capital improvement plan for the whole courthouse. There's other recommendations in there to start budgeting for in the overall CIP, but the priority from the sheriff and the finance committee is to do those security upgrades first. And that's an estimate of $171,625. $40,000 for the additional parking area at Fleet Services. And we're also recommending we shift the SUV for the Economic Development Department to FY27. And that's been working out really well. Ms. Flint has been primarily using the, I haven't been made aware of any conflicts. She uses the admin vehicle more than anyone else. And there hasn't been any conflicts with her using that. So I think we can, I had suggested to the finance committee that we move that to FY27 for now, just to reduce our capital costs. And also Chief Ramsey has been able, and we'll be looking at buying that vehicle in FY25, the fire and rescue pickup. I know in my memo I said shift that to FY27, but since this was produced, we became aware of a deal to acquire that off of the state bid sooner than later at a very good deal, and we want to take advantage of that. And so that's where we are with the gap. Of course, as hoping for, of course, answering any questions from the Board of Supervisors, but also to hope some direction from the board on their ideas on how to close that $780,000 gap. One of the things I do have here is our estimated 20% reserves would be $16,656,867 based on the current draft of the budget. And our current unassigned reserves as the fiscal year ending FY24 was $28 million. That's a question that the board often asks me. I should have already had that in there. So it's before you now.
Can you repeat those numbers for me?
Yes, we ended FY 2024, the unassigned reserves.
I guess it's right there.
Yes.
It's on the,
With
he's
28.
pointing it out.
Okay, sorry. With 28 million. So that's going to be lower because with FY25, because we're taking money out of reserves for the capital projects. But 16 million, I'm going to round up, 16.7 million is the minimum requirement to abide by the board's financial policy for FY26.
And if I may, I'll add one quick update on broadband. Because we had to rescope the Brightspeed project, there will be an agreement coming from DHCD, VADI, Virginia Telecommunications Initiative, under DHCD, for the board to consider and hopefully approve. You've already done it once, and this is, now that we had to rescope, we got to redo that with the rescope project. And I've also asked our Brightspeed representative to come in April to give the board an update on that, on where they are, because they're already kind of moving ahead with their build. And it'll probably be, I will request it be on the second meeting of the month, because the first meeting is going to be pretty busy.
And on our next, at the next meeting, the first invoice to Bark on the other vetting project, that's moving along. And so the first invoice will be ready to be paid.
All right. That it for the updates?
It is, and as always, you know, to start off with, I mean, you're to close a budget gap. You know, you look at cuts. If there were any targeted cuts that board members would like to make, certainly anything's up for discussion, and or increasing revenues. There's only two ways to do it.
So we have a difference here, gentlemen. Any ideas?
Well, like Mr. Suter just said, you either got to make cuts or you got to increase taxes. I think we've asked the departments to go back and make cuts, and some have come back and put some cuts, and we've made cuts. And, you know, there are certain things I think we owe the citizens. We owe fire rescue, law enforcement, education. Look at the school budget, we made cuts. So I think we're to the point where we need to increase revenues. There are certain things we took out of reserves, which are good, but you can't take operational, well, you could take them out of reserves, but you're just digging a hole, because eventually you're going to have to put that money back, or you're going to run out of reserves. So I think it's time to consider increasing taxes, and it wouldn't hurt my feelings to increase them by 5 pennies, with a portion of that going into CIP reserves.
How are you feeling?
In February of 2024, we were preparing the 25-year budget. And that year, we took $2.1 million out of reserves. And that year, I think our budget was $876 out of balance to do that. And the budget was $1,900,000 higher than the previous year. And for this year, we're looking at $708,000 out of balance. And we're looking at taking $4.6 million out of revenue, out of reserves. We can't keep taking money out of reserves to balance our budget, in my opinion. And of course, we quit assessing yearly for county tag decal, which is about $500,000 in revenue that we are losing every year because of that. I think we're going to have to increase our taxes, and I think we ought to increase it at 8 cents. If we increase it at 8 cents, we're still going to be using $2.7 million out of our reserves. But and that's going to give us a 69 cents tax rate over the 61 cent. But we just can't keep continuously taking money out of reserves. And this is still going to be taking 2.7 million out of reserve to balance the budget. So, you know, I think we certainly need to be looking at 8 cents.
Daniel?
I respect my colleagues, but I certainly disagree with their sentiments. And I'm not opposed to potentially looking at a tax increase, but at the same time, we're talking about a $700,000 gap. There are still things in our budget that we should be looking at cutting, and we need to take a hard look at some of those things. And we can reduce that gap a little bit, maybe not all, but we can reduce a little bit. And like I say, I respect the two gentlemen and their opinions, but I was more along the lines of instead of 5 or 8 cents, maybe a penny or 2. That's where I was at. And even if it wasn't the real estate, looking at the personal property, one of the things I was going to ask Ashton tonight is just kind of getting our local jurisdictions around us what their tax rates are, just for comparison's sake, from the personal property and real estate. The one thing I will remind each of you of is that even though, when you look at from 22 to 23, the tax rate went from 74 cents to 61 cents. That was not a decrease in taxes for our citizens. Citizens are still paying more in real estate tax because of reassessment. And on average, reassessments went up about 25 to 30%, I believe. So that was just equalization. And for someone like me, I can speak from experience. My taxes went up 40%. So just because the number was lower doesn't mean people are paying less.
Well, I mean, equalization is equalization across the county. It doesn't mean necessarily that one person's is less. Some people are going to be less and some people are going to be more. I believe that's how it works. But keep in mind that we went to 61, but it's still, for anybody that's in land use, that represented an 18% decrease in their taxes.
I'm not in land use.
Well, I'm not
And the
saying-
majority of our citizens are not.
No, all I'm saying is that for some people, there was an 18% decrease in taxes. So to our credit, we decreased taxes. So I feel that every year we have been incredibly cautious and the finance committee has done a fabulous job finding every place they can, but we can't keep plowing through reserves. And it's not, people have, there are certain organizations that needs work. They put in for more. I mean, we did not fund anybody more than what we funded most of our organizations at the same level that we did last year, correct?
Which ones are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about certainly all the nonprofits. They were, so it's not.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but I would add to that, I'm in a disagreement. We shouldn't be funding nonprofits. They should be doing their own fundraising. The only ones we should be funding is the ones we're contractually obligated to fund. And what we're forcing our citizens to do is collecting taxes and forcing our citizens to donate to these organizations. They're wonderful organizations, wonderful people. They do wonderful things. I cannot say anything bad, but I disagree with the fact that we force our taxpayers to donate to these organizations. And we haven't taken a look at that. Our next door neighbor, Lexington, doesn't provide funding to those organizations.
Well, we can have a conversation about what Lexington does later, but what I would say is there's quite a bit of what our organizations do that prevent us from having to do that ourselves at a much higher price. So you might say that it's great, but I would say that it actually does things that our community needs. But again, at this point, we're not looking into cutting nonprofits. But my point was that that the line items weren't, it wasn't as if we were adding a lot. We were meeting the needs. Some people asked for more. They had needs more than that, and you kept them level. We owe our employees raises, certainly cost of living every year, that we have to do. We have not raised rate in 5 years. In fact, we equalized, And our costs have gone up. So how are we meeting those costs? So I don't know what the magic number is. No one wants to raise it at all. I get that. I do think that we have to decide how much we're willing to take out of our reserves and what level we're maintaining. And then I think that for me, that would dictate how much what our rate would be.
When you look at our reserves are a result of, I guess, excess taxes that we have collected and hadn't used, and well managed, and funds, and maybe higher interest that we received. I really just don't want to use reserves to pay for operations or reoccurring expenses, because then you are digging a hole. I think our goal has always been, when you have a one-time expense like the library new system, well, that's not, you take that out of reserves and that's a one-time expense, and then that's won't happen again next year. So I think it's important to protect our reserves. I think it's more important to keep a close eye on our CIP projects, because while we're taking $4 or $5 or $6 million out of reserves, I think financially that's a whole lot better than going out and saying, oh, we need to borrow $6 million and then start paying it back and paying interest on it. That'll become, I think would be very harmful. Now, whether it's 8 cents or whether it's 5 cents or whether it's 3 cents, I think we'll have to look at. But, like Mr. McDaniel said, we can go back and make some cuts. And, but just want you to understand, the cuts that we make now are going to be felt. And when we make them and come back to you in a couple of weeks with the budget, we don't want to hear a whole lot of, oh, you can't cut that. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you've got a feeling that certain things shouldn't be cut, or that you don't mind what we have to do just to have us make cuts, I think we need some guidance. Because, I haven't had anybody call and say, don't cut this, don't cut this. So if you don't say it, it's too late after we propose it, I would imagine.
Well,
But it could be a balance of both.
May I add something? When I gave you options at the beginning, I said there were two, and one of them is to make cuts and increase revenues. The one I didn't mention was the one we're already utilizing, which has been discussed. The third leg of that stool is the use of reserves. And right now, all the reserves that were proposed to be used, I think, obviously, they are for capital. They're none of it for operations. And I've never been I've never given the advice to use reserves to fund operations, although in a recession or whatever, if you're in a situation like that, that's one reason that you have a fund balance policy, that you always have a rainy day fund, that if you have to use it, you use it for a short time. And then you figure out a way to then build that back up. So I just wanted to let you know that I only gave you two options. There are technically there are three.
well, it would really be helpful to me to understand our localities. I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think Bogota has 68 cents. So where do we sit? Yeah, in Virginia? And of course that's just property, that might be that they have a different mix. But Ashton, if you don't mind,
We can certainly do
Yeah.
that, but I think you just hit on that as well too, that different places have different mixes, which is again why you see, for example, a composite index of 0.8 in Bath County and we are not that. And then
mhm,
in uh, Harrisonburg, Rockingham, some of those other places, their composite index is lower than ours. And so there are different mixes, but certainly compare that. We can get you that information.
But, you know, it's hard to compare because you're not comparing apples to apples. I'm sorry, you go to Augusta County, their real estate's really low, but they have Hershey, Little Debbie's, all these plants. You know, Botetourt has a whole lot of things going on there. You know, we're looking at Rockbridge County, which is, you know, we're supposed to be agricultural, or and tourism are our great resources. Uh, they don't they don't contribute to the revenues like a Hershey plant or a little that, but those are the type of things that I guess our predecessors chose not to have here. So I'm sure that they can get us the tax rates, but I don't know. I don't know how that's gonna. It might make people feel better, but realistically, it really has nothing to do with finance, other than if your county has more money and generating more money, then you pay less taxes. Well, we can't go out and become industrialized over the next few months, nor is that what the citizens want. So I think, you know, they want education, they want law enforcement, they want, you know, fire rescue. And I think while in the past, at least we, you know, we had a great volunteer system. We have great volunteers. It's just the numbers of them are declining because they get older and you know, younger people aren't into volunteering as much for any number of reasons. But I think we are obligated to make sure that our citizens have those things. And I think if it means that we have to cut some and we have to increase taxes, then we have to do that. So, but I would not go into reserves, because if you take $500,700,000 out of reserves, which we could easily do, you start off the following year's budget $708,000 in the hole. So in order to, you know, you can't keep doing that. You're gonna run out of reserves real quick.
And that's where I'm at. What Mr. Lyons just said. I mean, I believe there are cuts that we can still make in our budget. And I believe we are going to have to look at some sort of tax increase. Now, I'm not in favor of trying to make up past years where we took money from reserve, trying to make it up all in 1 year. I don't agree with that. And, you know, our reserve is nearly 2 times what it's required to be. So what happens if you always save it, but the rainy day never comes? I mean, that's money that the citizens have paid to us in taxes that we should be using. I agree, not for operational, but certainly for capital.
Right.
And
it's
that's
good
where
to
I-
pay cash.
that there must be, we have a 20%, but obviously we try to keep a bit of a cushion, so each year that we do have the option of doing that. But we have been using 2 million, I think last year, I think you said 4 million about this year. What are you comfortable doing year in and year out? Because if you're not comfortable doing $4 million every year, then I think that probably 3 cents, as Mr. Lyons said, 3 cents might not be enough. It might be, we might need to do 5% to add 2 cents to our capital improvement each year. So it looks like everybody's in favor of at least 2 or 3 cents. Maybe not in favor, maybe that's a strong word. We don't mean in favor, but that might be the approach that we have, and how much more than that.
I guess my question, is there anything that you do not want cut? That would be my question. So that we don't go into those lines and.
I feel that there's already, no, I don't see anything on this list that I want to add for personally. I feel that not for me. Is there anything that stands out?
I don't,
For you?
I don't totally disagree with Mr. McDaniel on our nonprofits, tax exempt, that if we can't cut them, we at least ought to put them on notice. Don't expect it next year.
And which ones should we go through that list? I think just to.
Or I would say, how much money would we save if we didn't fund the non-contraction? Let's get a dollar figure of what we're talking about. If we're only talking about 50 or 60,000, that's one thing. If we're talking several 100,000, that would be a bigger thing that you could take some, but.
We have that list. I think I see Ashton over looking for it.
I think he's looking at it now.
Were you able to pull that up, Ashton?
Yes, you want me to share screen?
Would you like to see it?
Or if he could just give us an approximation of
Sure.
ones that were not non-contractual ones. How many are we really talking about?
Is that something you can do right here, Ashton?
Yes, it'll take me a minute if the board wants to have other conversations.
Well, and while you're looking for that, I mean, Mr. Lyons asked, what you want to cut or what you don't want to cut. The question is, and my question would be to the remaining board members would be, if we have to increase taxes, or do you have a strong feeling one way or the other versus real estate or personal property?
I think it could be mixed there.
Just to give you an idea according to what the figures are here, 1 cent on a personal property rate is 26,245. Well, you went up 25 cents from 4 1/4 to 450, or yeah, that would generate about $650,000 of revenue.
On the organizations, the chamber, community service board, the county fair, swimming, habitat, library, you're talking about those.
Right, the library is contractual.
That's contract.
All right, well, then so would be
Yeah, that's what I'm.
SPCA.
Yep.
Um, believe Boxwood would be considered one.
I think so.
So I've got that whole list and the total.
Was there any, do we want to go through the list of what we think is not important here in
Well,
public
no,
conversation?
I don't want
It's
to
not
say,
that I'm saying they're not important. They were all very important.
They-
I just think
exactly, they
it's
are.
it's
They are
whether we
important.
should be funding them or not. And that's two different
Yeah.
aspects that you have to separate emotionally.
Of the list that I just went through, it's $3.1 million.
Yeah.
So if you cut every one of them 10%. But here again, that list
You're
has,
counting the library, you're counting, but
yeah,
that's, so what you need to do, what are the ones that aren't contracted?
right,
is
Not,
rats,
not
is
what are,
rats contracted?
is what?
Rats.
I do not believe they are. Spencer, rats are contracted. Oh, yeah.
I do not believe so.
Augusta Health Center?
We do have,
In our health.
we
center?
do have, well, we've got a contract with them to do their service at it. They get their fuel through us.
Right, but we don't have a contract to fund them.
I think Ashton can tell you here.
So our total, the
Contract.
contractual is $219,479.
And is RATS one of the contracted or not?
It's one of the ones that's not.
It's
So
not.
219,000. That's what we're talking here.
Yes, ma'am.
So contracted would be something like the SPCA.
So if we did that, we could save a little more than half a cent. Correct? Was there anything else other than the nonprofits that you thought we could?
And one option too is again, we press and we say this at every meeting. If you do have an idea going through the budget, there's something that you would like for the finance committee to target for a cut or anything like that. Certainly, if you can share it, it's coming up on the time that we're going to have to advertise here in a couple weeks. And if an option for you tonight, if you wanted to add a meeting, I'm not saying you need to do that, but if you wanted to come back and sit down again, like say a week from today, we do have, this is fortuitous. We got 3 weeks between meetings on this cycle. You're not meeting again until the 14th. So if you wanted to, you could pull together or pull ideas together and meet back again. I'm not saying you need to do that. I'm just saying that's an option for you.
Happy to meet again.
And you can also, you can talk directly, onesies, twosies, obviously not three of you, but you could talk to, one of you could talk to a member of the finance committee and say, I'd like to look at this, or you could share that with Mr. Harrison and myself, and we can share it for you if there are any thoughts on that.
I don't expect anybody to come up with the master plan tonight, but any advice or comments or anything, yeah, please reach out to us so we know when we go into our next finance committee meeting what we're looking at or what your thoughts are, and certainly take those into consideration.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your work.
So we're about, what, 1.5% out of whack?
Well, with the nonprofits removed,
No, with this currently what we have, the 700.
Percentage is if I'm looking at the total budget.
yeah, it's like 2 cents.
You're talking about a percentage of the total budget, right?
Right.
Oh,
Tell you in a second. I'm sure your math is probably.
No, it might not be because I just had to do it in my head, but I mean, we've already asked all the departments to try to reduce some. Some have.
yeah, so, yeah, well, $64 million budget, so one would be 648,000 would be 1%. A little over 1%.
Yeah, 1.5% would be 960,000.
So, and we're still waiting to hear on the final budget, and that would from the state. That 1.5% bonus would be worth something if it doesn't get passed. I don't know.
Should we look at a potential date for,
I think we should.
I'll be leaving town Wednesday and be back Tuesday. So. And next Monday night, I'll be busy. I'd try to do it remotely, but it'd probably be too noisy in the arena.
So Dan, you said the 7th will not work?
No, I'm gonna be in San Antonio.
And we have a regular board meeting on the 14th.
The regular board meeting's on the 14th, and that is to,
Very long meeting.
yeah, that's a pretty packed meeting, but either way, the 14th, if you wanted to stay on track and not have to do an ordinance to extend the date, you need to authorize advertisement of the budget the night of the 14th. So what we're looking at, I think, just looking quickly, Mondays are the only kind of sacred day that the board meets that somebody else that I can guarantee nobody else is meeting on that night. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, I'm not sure. I'd have to check with, of course, city election and school board, planning commission, check on all those. So I can't guarantee you're gonna have a room available except on Monday the 7th. And I know Supervisor Lyons has said he's not gonna be able to make that.
Well, I think it might be a goal by then for each one of us to have a recommendation, to be very clear on which way we would like to go. And of course, Mr. Lewis is not here, so we don't know his thoughts on that.
And we are, like I say, we are happy to serve as the clearinghouse. If anybody wanted to make a list and give it to us to give to the finance committee, I would say that when are your dates again?
I leave Wednesday and I get back Tuesday. If I could be, if the planes fly right, I could be here for a Tuesday evening session. Or late Tuesday afternoon.
Well, and I'm looking for what I'm trying to figure out is a finance committee meeting.
Yeah, you're not gonna have one this week.
We don't have time to provide notice, this week because you'll be gone.
I mean, I would think that if the non-finance committee members could get us a list of, this is what I want to do by next Monday. That gives you a week to go through, figure out what you want, how you want it. And then we can get together, finance committee can get together and take a look at all that the following week, which would be maybe Wednesday or Thursday, once you're back.
Yeah.
And then we could be prepared to come to the 14th with some suggestions.
It would be great if we could try to do that on Wednesday of next week. That way, gives staff a little time to put together whatever comes out of the finance committee, because it's going to have to go on board docs. We're going to have to be ready to post the agenda with the board report, on Thursday of next week.
The Wednesday the 9th, finance committee.
So by Wednesday, the 9th, you want a recommendation from each non-finance person, the three of us,
I
to
would
make a recommendation.
ask for hopefully by Tuesday, if possible.
Tuesday?
That way we can consolidate these recommendations for the finance committee to get a glance at before they come into the meeting, the finance committee meeting. Sooner if you got them.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, ideally, if you would have your recommendations by, say, close of business on Monday, the 7th, that gives us the 8th staff time to pull that all together to present to the finance committee on Wednesday.
5 p.m. Monday, the 7th.
Yes, ma'am.
And we shoot for noon on Wednesday.
We can,
I'll get that advertised.
okay.
That it?
That's all I have.
All right. Gentlemen,
I'm good.
all right. I have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
I'll second.
Mr. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Day.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yeah.
And I vote yes. Thank you very much.